Hey y'all, the Lord is wanting me to share about my time growing up in poverty. So, doing that today. When I was 12, it was revealed that my father had been struggling with a crack cocaine addiction, and his addiction and my mother's anxiety would be the reason that we remained in poverty throughout the rest of my childhood. We would often get evicted and have to live with family who really were not showing us real love. And I'll talk about a couple of those instances. Our electricity and water would oftentimes get cut off, and sometimes we would even move into homes that had poor living conditions. I recall we moved into one home that didn't have running water, and we would just have to go to the neighbors and, just take buckets over there and use their spigots to fill up the buckets with water. This one particular home, we had to do that. I was 12, and I remember we would just fill up buckets with water, and we would just take ice cream pails and we would pour some of the water into ice cream pails, and that's how we would bathe. And because there was no running water, we were not able to use the toilet. We would just use the bathroom in buckets. I was a very emotional kid, for a good reason. I remember just always arguing with my parents, and the cops came over to that home one day, and I remember, telling my father in front of the cops that I didn't want to live with him. And then the cops mentioned that they could put us in foster care. They did not at that point. But it was at that time that the Department of Family and Children Services opened up a case. The case remained open for years and would close, I feel, just before I reached adulthood, because I know when I was 16, it was still open. So, again, I was 12 going on 13, and we left that house and we moved in with family. And that was just a really hard time, maybe for everyone. But I remember, the people we were living with said we could only bathe once per week because they didn't want the water bill to get too high. And I'm not saying these things to dishonor anyone. I'm just telling my story. I recall there was a time when we also lived with my grandfather, when he said we could bathe only once a week. I remember I had my cycle and I was like, can I take a bath? He was like, didn't you just bathe yesterday? But in this home with this family, this was my father's brother and his wife. We were living with them. And so my cousin, who was like 2 or 3 years older than me, I remember she was just following me through the house one day trying to argue with me, and I was just walking away, but she followed me from room to room, and then we entered one room, and I just blew up at her, and I called her something racist that I had heard one of my aunts use before. One of my aunts used a racist word when I was 10, and so I just repeated it. And then my aunt, she just jumped on me, and she was just on me, and she grabbed my face, and she was like, you're so disrespectful to everyone, but now you're disrespecting me. And I could see everyone through my peripheral vision. I could see my family and my cousins and uncle just, coming closer to see what the commotion was about, to see why this grown woman was screaming and on top of this 12-year-old. But I started walking out, and then my uncle was like, get your ass out my house. And so we were all just standing outside at this point, just a really huge family, my huge family, and, their huge family. And I was telling my mom, I was like, I don't want to be here. And then my aunt was like, we don't want you here. And she, at that moment, was calling our caseworker. And she got off the line with him, and she happily told my mother, oh, he said that he could put Ashley in foster care. And she sounded so pleased to be able to say that. I guess she was hoping that it would be a bad experience for me. But the thing is, I entered foster care a few years later, and it was actually the safest, healthiest experience of my childhood years. And I'm not really going to talk about my time in foster care in this video. There isn't much to say. Veronica was just a really great mother, and I was messed up with anxiety, and I feel like she was just very sensitive to that, and, you know, just very sympathetic to that fact. But y'all, so yep. My parents sent me to live with another uncle, and this particular aunt and uncle, this aunt didn't like that aunt. And they hadn't liked each other for years. So I had scratches on my face, and, you know, the aunt I was now living with was saying that she was going to call defects on the woman who put scratches on my face. And I told my cousin, I have a cousin who's my age, and we would, you know, ride the same bus even after I moved out, ride the same school bus. And I told her that. So I guess she told her mom, and her mother apologized to my mom for putting scratches on my face. You know, I did go back to their home like during Christmas that year. It was a month before I turned 13. And I just spent Christmas with my family. And I remember one of the kids saying, "Mama beat up Ashley." It was a whole conversation they were having, and they sounded very proud of it. You know, that's just, I guess that's just the world that, you know, that's just the way some people are raised. It's just the world they're brought up in, to just be excited about a grown woman scratching up a kid's face and saying, "Mama beat up Ashley." So, yep, I'm living with another aunt and uncle at this time. Let me just call them Auntie S and Uncle F. And during this time, I was attending the same church, you know, as my cousins who I was living with prior to moving in with Auntie S. And we were just in the church van once, like, because we had just finished attending youth group, and she and I don't know how the argument started, but I remember it ended with her saying, "You're just mad nobody loves you." And then I hit her, and then there was a fight. And, you know, that statement hurt me, I guess, because subconsciously that's what I was feeling. But y'all, Auntie S was not a healthy woman either. You know, she would just gossip about children and about other adults with her 10-year-old daughter. I recall there was a day when she asked me to call my mom for some food stamps. You know, she was like, "Actually, if you're living here, then, you know, you need to call your mama up and ask her for some food stamps," like, you know, as though that was my responsibility. But I did it. I don't know if Ma gave her anything. Ma just wanted to get off the phone with me. But I think it was very odd, you know, that Auntie S had me call her up, you know, as though she couldn't do that herself. There was a time our entire family was living with Auntie S and Uncle F. And I recall we were just all in one room. Like, there were a lot of us, and we were just all in that one room. And there was a day that my uncle just turned the power off in that room. And I don't know how, you know, that made my parents feel. I don't know how it made my father feel. I don't know if my father felt helpless. But that was just a very unloving, unkind thing to do. So we rarely had even the basics that we needed. Like, we rarely had even like oral hygiene products. We didn't know we were supposed to brush our teeth. I mean, at least I didn't. I just thought, hey, you know, because when I was a kid, you know, we would always only have it at the beginning of the school year. So I thought that's something that was only done at the start of the school year. And whenever I would smell the scent of toothpaste, it just reminded me of the beginning of, you know, a school year when I was like in elementary school. So yeah, we didn't know that we were even supposed to brush our teeth. There was like one day when I was like 14, I was in 8th grade. One of my peers asked me to help her understand the lesson, and I would just have a really tough time in middle and high school with classwork, but that was something that I did understand. But I told her I didn't because I'm like, I hadn't brushed my teeth, so I didn't want her to come that close to me. So, that memory just stuck with me. When I was 15, I remember we were living in a nice home and my father was not supposed to be there, per defects' request. And my dad had went to jail for some reason. I don't know why. But I remember he called my mom one day. He was like, "Can I come home?" She was like, "Yes, come home." And she seemed so relieved. And I remember I told our caseworker that he was back. He just would kind of make himself scarce when the caseworker would come around. But I told her, I'm like, he's back here. And I told my mom that I told the coworker that. That I told the caseworker that. And my mom, she seemed to think about it for like a split second. She was like, you just fucked up my whole world. And that kind of hurt my feelings. Well, actually, it really hurt my feelings. And later on, I told her that it did, and she apologized for having said it. So, y'all, I'm 15, and I am not going to school much. I was truant a lot. I had so much anxiety. And my brother and my little sister, they were not going to school either. So we had to all attend court for truancy. And I asked the judge asked us if we were going to all go back to school. And my sister and bro said, yeah. But I said no. So the judge sent us all out the courtroom, but he called me back in. And he asked me again if I was going to school, and I told him no. And so he was like, okay, I'm going to put you in foster care. And if you don't go to school while you're in foster care, then I'm going to put you in juvenile. So I think that there was like mercy and sympathy, in his decision. And 3 months later, he asked me, I had court again. He asked me if I wanted to return to my parents. And I told him yes. And I do not regret that choice. When I moved back, things were very awkward. I recall even my eldest sister, Talisha, she said that she felt like I was somebody else's sister and not hers. And I remember, secretly I wanted to return to Veronica's house. And I recall I had an argument with my mom one time, and she was like, you can go back to Veronica's house. I don't know why she said that. But nobody's perfect. I was sad in those days, and I was cutting myself a lot. I was just feeling very unhappy. My sisters were always rude to me during that time, and I never knew why. So I was just an unhappy camper. And I was like, man, I would have just rather felt the physical pain than the emotional pain. I cut myself a little when I was at Veronica's house. I would cut my stomach, and when I left and moved back in with my folks, I would cut my thighs, and they would just be like really deep, ugly, red scars. But they did completely heal, and, there's no trace of them. But I really didn't feel loved by my parents. I recall, as I was approaching 18, I was just getting kind of sad and stuff because I was like, well, when I turn 18, I'm not going to have any place to go. But after I turned 18, I would continue living with my family or other family members or on campus when I was in school. And when I was 24, during the time I was married, I lived, me and that guy had a place. The marriage didn't last long. And, years later, when I was 29, I began truly living on my own for the first time ever. And it's actually been the most healthy experience of my life. Living on my own here in the Triangle, it's just been so, so good. I've just been experiencing the peace of God, and my mind and my body are at rest. There's no external noise, and because of that, the internal noise can be relieved. I've been resting, growing, and healing in God and learning so much about myself. And, for the first time in my life, I just feel well. I feel truly, truly well. And I cannot fully express my gratitude for that fact. But y'all, Praise Jesus. I love my family. I love my folks. So yep, that's the video. Amen. Short and sweet. Okay, well, I love you guys. God bless and speak with y'all soon.